Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I'm Steve Call. I'm the Dean of the school here, and I'm just going to welcome you and give you a brief introduction to today's information session, a little bit of an overview of the degree programs and what we're working on here at the school. I hope this will be a useful morning to you. You're going to hear from a lot of people, colleagues on the faculty, some students, and some of the folks in our admissions office who can talk to you about practical issues like financial aid and the process here. So this is my third year at the school. I love it. I think this is a really dynamic and exciting place these days. And I want to give you some practical sense of what the two major master's degree programs feel like, but you'll get a lot more of that from my colleagues on the faculty when they're up here. How many here are interested in the MS program, they think? And anyone specifically interested in the MA program? A couple or three. Well, they're both, of course, very intense programs, and they're designed to basically lift up your skills if you're already practicing journalism to a completely different level through very close mentoring, small seminars, and a lot of intensive field work. This is a teaching hospital. It's very alive with journalists and journalism. Down the hall, there's the documentary festival today, which I hope you'll drop in on after you finish this session. That's a series of films being screened by the graduating class of December. The documentary program lasts 18 months. But if you go on the website and read the little hullabaloo we had this week with ExxonMobil, exchange of letters with them about some work our students did in the Los Angeles Times, you'll get a feel for this place as a little bit more than just a classroom. There's a lot of work going on and a lot of energy. We're in New York City. The whole media industry is here, so the speakers and editors and producers and filmmakers and prize winners are all just a subway ride away, and they come in and they fill the place with a sense of what's really happening in the field and in the profession. It's a really exciting part of the school. The MS program and the MA program I'm going to leave for the faculty to kind of clarify exactly what the distinction is. I wanted to just give you a sense of 5 organizing priorities in the way we approach journalism education here, what we teach, what we really emphasize. And these are partly reflected in concentrations, which you can ask about both to me and as the day goes along. So the first is international journalism. I think we recognize here that this profession, like almost every other profession, is very rapidly globalizing, partly because technology has made everyone into a global publisher, since the web and digital platforms allow you to reach audiences, even if you're just intending to publish a regional newspaper. And this is also reflected in newsrooms, which are becoming much more international in their hiring and in their publishing strategies. The New York Times has a channel in Mandarin, and virtually everyone has a multinational newsroom today. So orienting ourselves to journalism on a global scale, teaching it, thinking about how to practice it is an important part of what we're doing these days. And of course, our student body is gloriously diverse. I think we have students this year from something like 40 different countries. Secondly, we are really committed to investigative reporting at the school. We think that at a time when the profession has been disrupted by technological change, there are some skills that are going to endure for 20 or 30 years, and they're the kinds of skills that every journalist needs some acquaintance with, and some journalists will want to go deep on. But they are very teachable, but they require time and mentoring, the ideal kinds of skills to teach in a journalism school. Research methods involving public records, courthouses, litigation, data sets, the kinds of deep organizing and interviewing techniques that are required to get to the bottom of difficult projects. Narrative writing that's associated with making investigative reporting accessible and influential. A third theme here these days is visual journalism, which really encompasses the documentary program, our emphasis on photojournalism, and the role that video journalism has always played at the school, but which is now changing in very exciting ways. as the field changes. So the documentary program, as you know, is a specific concentration. It requires a special application and acceptance. It's 3 semesters. The 3rd semester is devoted to making a film. That's why in December the graduating class is screening their films. We have a fantastic photojournalist on the full-time faculty, Nina Berman, and others who teach here. And the video program, David Claytel, who will be on the panel next, can better describe where it's going. But it's led by faculty like David, who have a great sense, who I think last year he taught one of his workshops in CNN's newsroom down Columbus Circle, a great sense of how traditional broadcast television is changing as people unplug from their cable watching habits, their destination habits, consume on laptops and mobile. And one of the consequences is that almost everybody who wants to practice news gathering these days has to have an acquaintance with producing video and how video works. But even those who want a career in front of a camera or behind a camera need to change the context in which they learn these skills. So that's a very big commitment that we have going on here this year. The 4th big theme that I wanted to mention is data journalism, data science, and computation. This is a really exciting time for journalists to essentially respond to the changes in the structure of information in our world. Most of the power that's exercised by governments and by corporations increasingly involves the use of data, whether it's writing algorithms that tell you what price you get when you go on a website, depending on what zip code you're in, or whether it's administering public services through huge data sets and assumptions that are built into how one citizen receives services versus another. These are traditional subjects for journalists to knock on the door and ask, what are your assumptions? Why are you doing this? Are you discriminating? Where are the flaws in your system? In the old days, you might do that at the front door of the bureaucracy of the Department of Health and Human Services or at the Medicare administrator. Today, you really need to be able to interrogate the data itself. And this requires computational skills, it requires data science skills, it requires coding skills in some cases. This is also true of storytelling. Data visualization, narrative, the creative new forms of storytelling are going to require at least an acquaintance with the computational and data skills that are generally over in the computer science department of the School of Engineering. We don't intend to make you into scientists here, but we want to orient you to these important changes in the field of journalism, make you comfortable working in teams, and give some of you who are interested in concentrating in this field a chance to go much deeper, to polish your knowledge of statistics, coding, networks, algorithms, and connect that to the agenda of journalism, which is what's a story, why does it matter, how do we tell it. The final theme I wanted to mention is just related not just to the MA program, though it's primarily located there, which is the idea of subject matter expertise and knowledge journalism. Again, the field is changing. Some things will endure. Specialized knowledge, confidence, expertise is one of those things. And the MA program is built around a track that connects subject matter knowledge with deep journalistic practice. But even in the MS program, in the second half of the 9-month program, when you get to your workshops, many of them offer deep subject matter expertise in a setting of journalistic practice in a way that's similar to the MA program. I teach a spring course on how to cover armies and spies, which is just happens to be my professional background, but we do a lot of work on, for example, how court martials work, how military justice works, how the arms trade works, so that when you go out and look for stories around these hard subjects, you have a sense of how the world is organized. But then we combine that with actual practice, going out and picking projects and going after difficult subjects. So those are the big themes that I wanted to highlight. I've probably taken more than enough of your time for my role in this, but I've got a few minutes if you wanted to ask me some questions before I hand it over to David and Jonathan and Elena. you're going to be journalists. You've got to practice shooting your hand in the air. Nobody? Yes. Yes, there's quite a lot of opportunity to study and to develop skills in video and broadcast journalism. There are, I don't know, this year 3 workshops in the spring that are essentially video newsrooms, broadcast newsrooms. There is on-air skill development. There's production, collaboration, and workshops. There are modules in the fall where you prepare for this going deep in the spring. Depending on your background in video, if you come in with video skills, you can qualify to leap to what's called Video 2. If you're coming in to learn those skills, you start with Video 1 and go from there. But yes, there's a very purposeful track and commitment to that. Yes?
Hi.
I'm sorry, if anyone has a question, if they wouldn't mind stepping up to the mic in the center aisle here. Thanks.
Okay.
So the live stream people at home can hear.
Oh, yes, good.
Hi, I'm Star Torres from Philippines. I'm a journalist. I'd like to know whether how you go about international journalism, because when you were talking about ASEAN issues, geopolitics, like regional issues, how do we do you have this strategy, whether how we internationalize regional issues? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it really is something that Sheila Coronel, who's the Dean of Faculty, who's also from the Philippines and who's my main partner on the 7th floor in thinking about some of these questions. We've tried to work it across the board. So one of the requirements that everyone who comes to the master's programs in the MS program is to go through a little bit of teaching about the history of journalism, the ethics of journalism, the law of journalism, so that when you're in the field, you're at least oriented to what the tripwire dilemmas are that you might encounter, that you may need a lawyer to help you through, or you may need an editor to help you through. Well, I think for many years at this school, those were taught pretty much strictly in a First Amendment American context, and we've revised our approach to that so that the ethical dilemmas we teach, the legal knowledge we try to impart is international, truly global, so that you can hop from continent to continent and from different kinds of governmental settings and at least be oriented to these important parts of professional journalism. And then as to the practical execution of international journalism, how you internationalize a regional story, how you practice international correspondence, there are a whole series of courses devoted in the spring exactly to that. And this year we have a course on global migration and some postgraduate fellowships associated with that. We have, I think, 2 sections of international journalism. My Armies and Spies course is very much a global curriculum. It's not just covering U.S. institutions and so forth. One or 2 more? Yes.
Can you speak to the this specific technological aspects, especially with regard to the documentary program, in terms of whether there are particular platforms you work on, whether there's particular kind of technology that you guys
let me let you ask that. Let me put that in David's hopper and let him answer it, because he has his hands on that much better than me.
I've got 2 questions here from the live stream. We have a live stream here going and a chat also for people who were not able to come to New York. The first question is from Mai Lee, Dupuy Comp. Does the MA program also focus on video and broadcasting?
You can undertake a video master's project. The MA program is primarily seminar-based with 2 lead seminars in the fall and the spring, and enrollment in courses and co-teaching that provide a deep subject matter expertise in the 4 tracks. They are politics, science, medical and environmental reporting, business and economics, and arts criticism. But the main thread through those seminars and the enrollment that you engage in subject matter classes is a very ambitious master's project, which you have an advisor to work on. If you do a written version, it's 10,000 words or so. But the video version that could complement a written document or be part of a multimedia approach. We're even trying to encourage the use of data and computation as elements of these projects, are things that if this was your ambition, you could work out. But the MA program presumes some engagement with journalistic practice before you come in. So if your desire is to become a video journalist from a standing start, to develop on-air skills, to work on editing, and then you would either want to pursue that curriculum in the MS program or equally consider the documentary program. What was your other question, Christine, from the live stream, or did you?
Steve, this question is from Véronique Brossier, and she would like to know, how does one become an expert in the military, as you are, or other closed fields? Do you open your Rolodex to students?
Yeah, in a limited way, in an appropriate way. No, the idea is to basically, you have to, this is the whole purpose of this 15-week class. So you should enroll in the class is the answer to the question. But the curriculum, which I think is readable online, essentially combines teaching in these fields that recur as a national security reporter. So espionage cases. What is an espionage case? How does it unfold? If you want to write a story about it, how do you do it? If someone's court-martialed, that's different than covering a trial in a civil court. How is the military justice system organized? What does it mean for journalists? Where are the records? Where are the sources? And then we'll have reporters come in who are actively covering these beats, and we'll Skype them around the world too and say, how do you do your work? Where do the stories come from? How do you develop sources? And so that's not just true of that class, but there's an investigative reporting class in parallel about healthcare reporting. There's a project class that goes deep on other subject matter. There's one this year on campaign finance. How do you break down conflicts of interest and corruption in politics in different settings? Another colleague works with data science, has been working on shipping and smuggling. So there's lots of areas where you can do the same thing. Maybe one last one for me, and I'll let the faculty come up. Yeah, please.
Yes, sir. Curtis Coleman. I'm a senior at the Columbia School of General Studies. You kind of maybe got to my question with that last one, but I was just wondering, as far as the military personnel and intelligence aspects, if and what opportunities in the program, whether it be to prac app actually dealing with military personnel and possibly intelligence assets at all?
Well, I've had the pleasure to teach. Last year in my workshop, there were two veterans, one from the Navy, the other from the Marines, and they were obviously experts in the very thing that we were studying in their own experiences, but they also had an ambition to figure out how to convert their experience in the service into a career in journalism. They had a lot of questions they wanted to pursue through journalism, and so they were there to try to figure out how to transition into this field while taking advantage of their own background in service. So we always have a handful, sometimes more than a handful of folks who are here coming either directly out of the service or been out for a couple or 3 years and are moving into journalism. Obviously we don't practice espionage. We cover people who practice espionage, but we get very granular and detailed, and the more expert knowledge we can bring into the classroom, the better our work will be. So great. Well, good to see you. Thank you. And let me invite my colleagues up to continue the conversation.
Thank you very much, Steve Cole, our dean. I'm going to invite next our panel of faculty speakers to join us here. And while they're making their way in this direction, I'm just going to make some introductions to other people, other admissions staff people who are in the room. My name is Christine Souders. I'm the Associate Dean for Admission and Financial Aid. I recognize quite a number of faces in the audience. And I know that there are also people on the live stream that I've corresponded with or that others of the admissions staff have corresponded with. So we welcome all of you here. We're delighted to see you, and we look forward to answering all of your questions. I'd like also to introduce David Hooker, who is standing over here. Many of you have spoken with David by telephone. You met him as you came in this morning. He's a good person to know. And there is also Brett Sion, whom you'll meet a little bit later. Brett is our Associate Director of Admission and Financial Aid. Many of you have also met or spoken with him. Next, I would like to go to our faculty panel. Thank you all for being here. We recognize that Saturday morning is not everybody's first choice of a time to be at an event like this. So we welcome everybody. I'd like to introduce, first of all, David Claytell. Professor Claytell is going to be speaking about the Master of Science program and our dual degree programs. Elena Cabral is the director of our part-time MS program. She will be speaking specifically to the part-time program and part-time questions. And Jonathan Weiner teaches in the MA program. He teaches science journalism, but he will also be able to answer questions about some of the other concentrations as well, including the question, I think, Dorothy Howard, that you had about where art and arts reporting fits into either the MS or the MA curriculum. So I'm going to turn this over now to David Claytell. David, if you would like to start.
Sure. Good morning. The MS program, which I assume you've already done some research about, and that Steve was describing a bit, is our largest, by far our largest program. It's the program that around which the school has now been organized for about 75 years. The school is a bit more than 100 years old, but the MS program is, by our standards, a relatively recent development 75 years ago. We update it, renovate it, change it, adjust it almost annually. So quite a few of the courses that Steve was mentioning didn't exist last year. And we're already working on a roster of ideas for next year and the year after that. It is it is a platform neutral, heavily digital program. So as you'll hear when Jonathan talks, and Steve mentioned this, the MA program is designed around certain subject matter and discipline, science and environment, politics, business, that sort of thing. The MS program is actually organized more around methods of journalism, and you can go cover almost anything you want. So if you want to do spies and espionage, or cover business, or cover religion, or anything else, you'll have that flexibility with the MS program. When I say methodology, the Stabile Investigative Reporting Program, right? It doesn't specify the subjects you're going to be investigating if you're enrolled in that program, but you can bet it's going to be deeply investigative. Or the documentary program that Steve mentioned, or data science. We have a dual degree program in computer science and journalism, jointly run with the School of Engineering and Computer Science here at Columbia. I happen to have those dual degree students in my reporting class every year, which is fun for me because I know next to nothing about real computer science. I'm pretty nerdy and geeky about sort of consumer level technology and all that, but you don't want me writing your algorithms. We have as Steve mentioned, one of my responsibilities is the informal track we have in video journalism, and that's one of the things that we're changing pretty significantly now. When I came, I was recruited to come to Columbia in 1990. I'm the longest serving member. I'm the old geezer of the faculty, and proud of it. And I was recruited here in 1990 from my job at Boston University to develop a broadcast journalism concentration. And of course, in 1990, broadcast journalism was the only kind of video journalism that existed. There was no such thing as citizen journalism or mobile journalism. I mean, things like YouTube or HuffPo or BuzzFeed or even cable were far in the future. I taught documentary production. I taught what we called enterprise reporting, taught nightly news courses. As Steve mentioned, today, video journalism is ubiquitous. The New York Times has dozens of people in a video production unit. The Guardian has a major video production unit. Every digital platform you can think of is deeply embedded in visual, but particularly video journalism. And really importantly, if you just think of world events, citizen journalism is almost always video journalism. There's some that's done with photography and some embedded links, but it's what people shoot in Syria or in San Bernardino, California, that catches our attention, that dominates the conversation. So we want students who enroll in the school now to be fully cognizant of and comfortable in a variety of video journalism formats. So if what you want to do is go work in a TV station, you can still do that. But if what you want to do is be a video journalist on any one of these other platforms, or even more commonly as an international freelancer or owning your own little production unit, you can do that too. So we emphasize field reporting, we emphasize shooting and editing, we are de-emphasizing things like sitting behind an anchor desk and reading for two reasons. One, it's a skill you can learn easily in by practice or in our on-air skills mini courses. And two, it's not really the highest value of journalism to be I would say coming to a school like this with the kind of intensity and depth of the courses that we offer across the curriculum, to learn to be an anchor person, not a good set of decisions on your part. So I want to mention two other things that fall under my kindly leadership, gentle leadership, not so much. I'm also in charge of the school's international collaborations and programs. We have two postgraduate dual degree programs, one with Sciences Po in Paris, and one at the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. We manage a master's degree in journalism at the University of Barcelona, and we have sort of BFFs at the University of Chile in Santiago, and schools in Sao Paulo and Amman, Jordan, and various others. I'm working on developing a school right now just outside New Delhi for the Times of India group. So if in the question and answer session any of you are interested in how that works, these would be things you would do after you finish your year with us. It's not integrated into our 10-month curriculum. What else? What did I forget to mention?
Law, business.
Yes. So here on the Columbia campus, we have dual degree programs with the law school, with CEPA. Columbia is a university that runs on acronyms, so CEPA is the School of International and Public Affairs, and with the business school. They add a year, or in some cases 2 years, but you get 2 advanced degrees from Columbia University. So if you're interested in those, Christine can... oh, that's right, and we have one with the Department of Religion. Professor Ari Goldman, who's on the full-time faculty here, who teaches covering religion and has a wonderful course that goes overseas every spring to visit country where there are multiple religious strands and histories. So they've gone to Middle East several times, to Turkey, to Ireland, to Russia, to all kinds of places where there's a complicated Italy, India, yeah. So there is a dual degree program, and Professor Goldman would be the best person to talk to you about that.
Great.
What else? I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to move next to Professor Elena Cabral, who's going to talk about the part-time program.
Hi, everybody. Can I ask how many of you are interested in the part-time program? Terrific. We get a lot for these sessions since we're able to offer it here in New York. But we do get students from other states as well. We actually have a flight attendant who's based in Atlanta who's now doing the part-time program and flying to New York every week, and she's managed to do it. It's really quite remarkable. I myself am a graduate of the part-time program. I graduated in 1999 and went to work for the Miami Herald, a job that I got right out of our job fair, which has become the biggest journalism job fair anywhere. And in a few minutes, you'll hear from Gina Boubion, one of my colleagues, about that, because I am part of the team that works with students in getting a job in journalism. After working at the Miami Herald, I returned to New York, partly because my spouse is based in the New York Times. And when we returned, I gravitated back to the journalism school. And I think it's sort of an illustration of how the role that the school plays in your life, and the idea that this investment that you're making is not really just for 10 months or 2 years, but really for a lifetime, because this really becomes an intellectual home for you, and it becomes the base for your networking. These career services that we offer are yours for a lifetime. And so this was the logical place for me to come back to. And I was lucky enough to start teaching as well while I was freelancing and raising a family. And this is, as Dean Call pointed out, sort of like a teaching hospital, but it's also a very unique working newsroom where you are, as a student and the faculty, part of a news organization that is covering New York City and the world. Just yesterday, we had a grad in San Bernardino call me last night to ask for advice. And so, you know, I feel that while I'm not in a newsroom in the media capital of the world, or downtown, I'm in a very unique one up here, and it's an exhilarating experience, truly. I would say that the part-time...
Elena, can I just add, this, we counted up the numbers once. I used to be an administrator, so number counting was important. This is, I think, one of the 5 largest newsrooms in the United States. This school, because at the school, between students and faculty, we have almost 400 journalists, which far exceeds the number that now exists at most famous news organizations. So it's a lot of impact on a lot of people.
And as a lot of news organizations have drawn back in their coverage of New York City, sadly, our students are given the rare opportunity to be able to break some news because they cover the boroughs like no other. And especially for part-time students who've maybe worked and lived in the city for a few years or maybe even a lifetime, this experience allows you to explore New York in ways that you never imagined. You sort of become a very different type of person. You know, in New York City, you're trained not to make eye contact at anybody and you just keep to yourself. But as journalists, you're supposed to go right up to people you've never met before, look at them in the eye and ask those rather impolite questions like, how'd you get that scar, and so forth. And it really changes you as a person and makes you not just a great journalist, but in many ways a very engaged individual. The part-time program is very much the same degree as the MS program that Professor Claytel was just describing. The big perk of it is that you can continue to work full-time and you get to stretch out your experience here instead of 10 short months, 2 years. That's 6 semesters in which you are taking classes, some in a cohort of part-time students, but most of them mixed in right with the full-time students as well. We get a really good mix of people who are right out of school and those who have been working in the business for a while and want to increase their game a bit by adding some new investigative skills, for example, or video skills. And And we get some career changers who are in their mid-40s and 50s who really want to come back into journalism or enter journalism for the very first time. And so what that does is create a wonderfully vibrant, very small classroom of 16 students. Usually the part-time program has 2 sections of 16 students, so 30, usually 34, 30, sometimes 35, 36 students at most. And they have this wonderful thing called student status, again, for 2 years. And what that does is make you eligible for scholarships and fellowships and internships in the media capital of the world, which is a wonderful thing to have. So occasionally, if they have the time, they will be doing internships, especially if they're trying to build up their resumes to look more journalistic rather than corporate, or depending on what background they have. The part-time program is also an opportunity for you to tailor your program so that you can specialize in a platform like the kinds that we've been discussing, video, data, audio, but also specialize in other ways, such as in subject areas. You can go into business journalism. You can take science journalism in the MS program, science reporting. You can, take a very deep dive into education reporting and cultivate, these specializations that I think are very important, because these are beats that are always front page news, because we're all invested in education in one way or the other. Having, a chance to report in the biggest school district in the country really gives you a lot of experience to work just about anywhere in the U.S. And as I said, I am involved in career services. I've left my business cards over by the orange juice bowl back there, and I welcome a chance to meet with you in person and give you a little more about, a few more details about the part-time program.
Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to introduce Professor Jonathan Weiner, who is going to talk about the Master of Arts program.
Thanks, Christine. Thank you all for coming this morning. I teach in the MS as well as the MA program, and I know, sorry, can you hear me? Yeah. So I know from the show of hands, most of you in this room are thinking about the MS program. I just want to start by saying that although I write about science, the themes that you bring to writing about science, the skills, the attitudes, those apply everywhere. So I'm teaching a narrative writing class in the MS program, and being here at the school provides extraordinary opportunities for learning the basics of narrative writing. So just this past week, Diana Markham, who won the Pulitzer Prize for her narrative features, was in town visiting here at the school talking about her craft. And Thursday morning she dropped in as a surprise guest with my MS students, who are all doing the kind of work that Diana is doing in California, here in New York, scattering through neighborhoods, finding stories, and learning the craft of making them stories that you just have to read, that you start and you have to continue, and you have to continue, and you're changed by the time you reach the end. There's a real art to that, and it's very exciting to hear from people like Diana Markham and to explore those skills here in New York, which is, the city of a million stories for every square inch. So the MA Science program that I teach in emphasizes that kind of narrative writing, and also, as Dean Cole said, emphasizes knowledge, emphasizes learning in depth about what we are covering and the stories we're telling. And that's true for all the other MA concentrations in arts and arts criticism, in business, in politics, and in science. You really need to know what you're talking about. And so the MA program is designed for people who have already got a few years professional experience, sometimes even decades of experience. I've had students my age and a little bit older in the MA program. And they come here for a year because they really want to get deeper grounding in what they're writing about. And what we give them is in-depth seminars on the special nuts and bolts of covering a deeply specialized area, like politics or business or arts, and certainly science. And we also bring in experts. So Columbia is a fantastic place for really all of those areas of expertise, and we bring in Nobel Prize winners and leaders in their fields from Columbia, from all over the city and around the city, to spend whole mornings with us talking about what they do. And that kind of experience really changes you as a reporter. Some of you may already have had that kind of experience now and then. You get a solid year. It's like New York cheesecake. It's very, very dense. It's very rich. And you know you've eaten it afterward. I never said that before, but I think the New York cheesecake, I may revisit the New York cheesecake. So that's what we do in the MA program, and we also go out and visit in the field. We go in the science program. I love that metaphor that Dean Cole used of the teaching hospital. That this is, well, Columbia actually has a teaching hospital, as you might know, uptown, and very often in my concentration, the MA science seminar, we go up there, we scrub in. We troop through the hospital, we go to the OR, and we spend a morning watching open heart surgery. And that's permitted there because we have friends who are doctors in the hospital, but also because it is a teaching hospital, and they're grad students, and I'm a prof, and we're learning too. We're learning how to cover surgery, all the issues of medicine, from the financial side of things, the funding, bioethical, to what's it like to be, have somebody's heart in your hands. It's an extraordinary experience. So far, we've only had one student faint, and it's life-changing. It really is. It's life-changing. And in the arts program, I know they visit artist studios, great artist studios around the city, and have the same kinds of life-changing experiences. Is there something I should... Christine had asked me to mention that in regard to arts, you can also take, you can take science courses as an MS student, you can also take courses that focus on the arts, and many other specialized areas too. So you're getting a sort of journalism 101 year with the MS, but you're also starting to go deeper into specialized areas.
Okay, thank you all very much. I'd like to take 5 minutes right now for questions from the audience, and if you would be kind enough to use the microphone so that the people on the live stream can hear you, that would be great. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Paula, and I'm looking at the MS program. And the most valuable learning I've had is when an editor sits next to me and edits my story in front of me. So I wanted to learn about what kind of feedback do you get from professors for both the writing and the multimedia products you create?
Frequent, intense, and you don't have to ask for it. That's the kind way of putting it. Yeah. You can't escape it. Can I just pick up a couple? I want to pick up a couple quick threads that Steve tossed my way. First, someone asked about whether there was any video in the MA program, and just to clarify that a bit, you can in fact apply to do a hybrid, meaning mostly print with video, master's thesis in the MA program. In fact, Jonathan and I right now are jointly advising a student who's doing exactly that, who's in the science MA, and I'm doing the video part of it with her. So it is possible. The second thing is, gentleman over here asked about production platforms. We can go into it in more detail with Jim Battelle in the back. Adobe Premiere is the standard editing system that we use here. A lot of students have Final Cut Pro or other things on their own laptops. That's fine too, but the school's own computers are loaded with Premiere, and we've got a range of camera gear of all sorts that, again, if you want the details, we can give it to you. There are also, not surprisingly, a number of courses that are starting to use high-end cell phones for field acquisition of video.
Also, just to piggyback on the editing question, I think this is an extraordinary place to produce work because the kind of editing you get is multi-tiered. So you get like a very, very deep line edit, that a copy editor might do, but extremely thorough. But you also get what's sometimes referred to at the times as backfielding editing. So that would be editing that has to do with the structure of your story, what sort of sources you go to, and just sort of thinking about other issues that we don't always talk about in journalism, such as, the diversity of the voices in your story, the gender balance in your story, when race comes into a story, when it matters and when it doesn't matter, those types of discussions. But also, because this is a professional school, we're not necessarily writing for the classroom. This is a wonderful place in that you can make mistakes and it's okay most of the time. But we want you to publish what you produce. And so very often professors here are incredibly helpful with, guiding students in finding a home for their stories, whether it's the New Yorker or a local publication like Metro, which is a commuter newspaper, because what we're all after are clips. That's our currency, stories. And so there's a very deep recognition of that from the very first story that you produce to your master's project, which is your capstone.
I could speak to that also because I advise half a dozen students each year on their master's projects or their MA thesis. That we're talking 5,000 to 10,000 words. Most students have not, they've never written anything approaching that length. And so what we do is we meet every week for half an hour, regular office hour appointment where we talk through the project from the very beginning, from brainstorming about what is it going to be, all the way through to the reporting and then heavy line editing and very close. It's a combination of an editor-writer relationship and a mentor-writer relationship, and it continues after graduation. It's, to me, the most satisfying thing about the job, actually, because you're really working one-on-one. Students grow a lot with that project. It's usually the biggest thing that you do here, and many of them do publish them. And we get involved at that stage also, just informally, again, as mentors. And I'm happy to say that of my students last year, the students I advised on their MA thesis, I think they've all now published already. They've published what they wrote. Some of them full length, some of them in part. And several of them have gone on to write books based on the thesis. So that's a huge part of the experience here.
And the other good part is if it doesn't rise to the level of the high standards that Columbia holds, it won't get published, which is something you definitely don't want to happen. But at the end, you do learn a lot.
I'd also like to pick up on what Jonathan was saying about the faculty members here becoming your mentors and colleagues for a lifetime. I was doing an alumni luncheon in Berlin several years ago, and one of the alums who was there with us said to me, I'm writing a book, and my reporting class teacher was Sam Friedman, and I would love to talk with him about this. Do you think it would be all right if I got in touch with him? I said, absolutely, of course. And by chance, when I got back from that trip, I walked in downstairs into the lobby, and Sam Friedman walked in right at the same moment. So I immediately grabbed him and said, I talked to one of your former students, it was so-and-so, and he's going to be getting in touch with you. And Sam immediately, he had had him in class 15 years before, immediately told me who he was, what the kinds of things he was interested in, and said, yes, absolutely, I'll be happy to talk with him again. So that is the kind of thing that you'll find here, both as a student and as an alum of the school. Brett?
Yeah, we have one question from the live stream for Professor Claytel specifically. Does the MS program cater to students who aspire to just start their career and develop a portfolio?
The answer, cater to them, who knows? I don't know if we cater to anyone. But we have three kinds of students in the MS program, and it's roughly divided about equally. We have a lot of, about 1/3 of the students, or perhaps a bit more, have just come out of undergraduate school, and they've are just beginning their exploration of serious journalism. Approximately 1/3 or 25% have had some journalism experience. It's often been an unsatisfying experience for them because they've been working in very small organizations where the standards aren't particularly high, where they don't get the kind of mentorship and editing that Jonathan and Elena were talking about, where, as a former student of mine who called me up a few weeks ago said, could you please review my work, because everything I do gets published, and I know it's not good enough. But no one here checks, speaking of his news organization. So that's the middle cohort. And then we have a lot of career changers. It was mentioned earlier about military vets, for example. Military vets, it turns out, are not only generally hardworking people, but great storytellers. They've seen and experienced a lot of things that the rest of us haven't that make them want to describe them, and that's the basis of good storytelling. So we have lots of new students, we have lots of people just beginning their careers, a large group changing careers, and a large group advancing their careers. And by the way, we mix everyone together in classes. Classes are not segregated by age or experience or nationality or any other factor in the MS program. So we have 22-year-olds sitting next to 42-year-olds, and so on. It enlivens the classes. It makes everybody better. So, yes, the
I'll
answer
just
to-
mention on career changers that there is a woman who is a lawyer by training who was here at this information session 2 years ago, and whose documentary is being screened down the hall this morning at the documentary festival.
She was in my reporting class.
Oh, wow.
There you go.
Hi, my name is Thea. I work in documentary film. I'm interested in the MS program, in particular the documentary program, and I'm wondering if you can speak to the compatibility of that particular program with SEPA, if that's a feasible combination.
Yes, it's a feasible combination. And quite a lot of the students in the documentary program are doing themes in their docs, and if you go down the hall and watch some a bit later, you'll see that are either broadly international or sort of broadly multinational. And documentary production overseas has actually had a longer and deeper history than here in the US. So in Eastern Europe and some Asian countries and others where there was never a robust broadcast journalism business, or because of government regulation, there wasn't much press freedom, documentary tended to be where people with a story to tell and passion about their story in video or earlier film formats would find their outlet. So I think it's completely doable. Like everything else in this school, time management and logistics are a really big part of the experience because our education is so intense. We all acknowledge that in the full-time program, we've got 2 years or so of content stuffed into 10 months. So everybody's busy, everybody's working all the time. You would have to juggle when you actually worked on your documentary film, given the different class schedules at a place like SEPA. But there's no reason at all you couldn't combine those two. And actually a lot of good reasons why you should.
The reverse is true also. There are SEPA students in my narrative class. There are always students from all around the school who come and take classes with us. And that's part of the excitement for the journalism students, because you're networking all the time, not only within the school, but within the J school, but within the larger university.
Hi, my name is Courtney. I'm interested in the MS program, particularly the part-time program. I'm wondering if you can speak to if there are any courses or specific assignments that prepare students for breaking news situations and sort of teach them how to write faster and still be accurate.
Oh, yes, you get that on day one, essentially. The reporting class, the sort of capstone class that Columbia, that is really at the part of the core curriculum, if you will, is the class that introduces students to doing just that, going out into the city, picking a beat, and doing a mix of what we refer to as enterprise reporting, so stories that you find on your own that you're not spoon-fed by an editor, and breaking news. We start out doing that in a very manageable way in the classroom with these assignments we refer to as deadline drills, where we give you a number of facts, details, maybe have you watch the mayor's latest speech on television, and then, turn a story around in 30 minutes or an hour. And I remember doing that the first summer here when the part-time students take that class and just choking, really just like couldn't do it. Timed stories were really difficult for me. And I think it's one of those things that you improve on, and the only way to improve on it is by practicing it, by doing it every week. And so during the course of that 14, 15-week summer, you are practicing this craft of deadline reporting and doing it, gradually in the more in the real world. We may use the Associated Press Daybook, a list of different things happening in the city, whether it's a press conference or a protest, send you out to cover it with a deadline that same day. And so, I think you're really immersed in that in your first semester. But news never stops, and the school really emphasizes a mindset for you to always think about as a journalist and to realize that there are stories everywhere. And any time in the course of the 100 years that this school has been in place and their news has broken in New York City, whether it was something like 9/11 or a presidential election, our students cover them. And they're prepared to do that because they start out learning how to write, breaking news.
I have one more question, if that's okay. I was curious about the role of social media and students, whether it be using Twitter to find sources, fact check. Are there any courses or assignments that help with that?
Oh, absolutely. And, students get a lot of this right out of the gate. In the reporting section, some sections some professors will have an existing websites that have actually developed quite a following over the years that they've been in place, such as the Brooklyn Inc. And so in the course of putting together projects, they learned different techniques in using social media. We also have a class that is part of the curriculum called Audience and Engagement, which specifically works very much in learning to harness social media as a tool in reporting and in growing an audience.
It's a required course.
It is.
Everybody takes it, or takes sections of it.
But in the spring, when you take these longer courses, 15-week courses called seminar and production classes that are very project and production based, professors have all, very much included in that curriculum strategies that students use, and sometimes it may be 2 or 3 people whose job is to promote work online, and it may be sort of just a blanket assignment for all of the students to think about ways to grow readership around a specific subject.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Erica. I am also interested in the part-time program for the MS. And I was wondering, you sort of answered this before, but if you could elaborate on what the module classes are and how, what the written word is specifically, what does that entail?
Oh, sure. A while ago, for a very long time, that capstone class, the reporting and writing core class, was one class, 15-week long class. The faculty deemed that it necessary to really take apart those skill sets so that students could immerse themselves in each one, to understand the skill of reporting as a news gathering activity, especially in a digital age, how to find, data, sources, how to conduct interviews properly. And so that is the purpose of that summer, that first summer that you're here. Then, and it's not necessarily focused on writing and putting together the structure of a story. But when you get to the writing module and you decide which one you'd like to take in the summer, you are focusing for 7 weeks just on that craft. Now, of course, many of us believe that there's really no such thing as great writing without reporting. And so, of course, since you've developed these news gathering skills over the summer, you should be quite prepared to go into this writing module, gathering the material that you then focus on, putting it together, understanding what a strong lead is, understanding what a kicker is, understanding what a nut graph is, because you have now the raw materials to put that together, to put a story like that together. That's 7 weeks, and then you get a break, and you start a second module, which is called Image and Sound. And within that bucket, you have a lot of choices. This is where students start to specialize a bit more, because they may go into video, to photography, data, or audio skills. If they decide they want to go into the radio route, this is when they start to specialize. And you do that in the fall semester, right in time for it to serve as a prerequisite for the spring classes, those longer 15-week classes that I was telling you about, in which they're very production-based. You have then really acquired all of the essential skills along the way to produce some terrific work and a portfolio in the spring.
And I would also say that those writing courses, you have a wide choice of types of writing courses. So you might take a 300-word writing course or a narrative writing course, or such as the narrative course that Professor Weiner is teaching this semester. Or you might take, I think Professor Call's Spies course is under that rubric. So there are a lot of different opportunities there. That's where you might also find a science writing course, an arts and culture writing course, that kind of thing, feature writing.
Actually, I have one more question, if that's okay. If you are not enrolled in the dual program with computer science, is there any opportunity to take classes in that department as well, or you have to have the double enrollment?
Well, when you take when you go into that image and sound module, you can take a data class. Okay. What that means is that you may, have to sacrifice the video, class, but it serves as a prerequisite for some of the spring classes. Having said that, I believe there may be some spring seminars that would give you some computational skills.
Were you asking about computer science or data? When you said in that department, were you
I guess computer
gesturing
science?
towards the School of Engineering, or?
Yeah, is there any opportunity?
No, you would not be able to
Okay.
take, unless you're in the dual degree program.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's right.
That's up to their own.
Yeah, but pretty much you'll find that you won't have time in your schedule. The MS students don't have time in their schedules to take courses outside of the journalism school. I will say, that, however, that the MA students are required to take 3 courses outside of the journalism school.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amanda Gomez. I'd like to know more about the programs in France and Spain. Are they an extension of the journalism school, or is it their own program on their own?
I'll answer briefly and then be happy to talk more when we...
And this will be our final question, and we'll bring our student panel in.
The important thing to think about these programs is they are dual degree, not joint degree programs. So the curricula are not actually integrated. You would do your year with us, and in fact, right now, this week, we're doing the admissions decisions here at Columbia and at Sciences Po for the people that want to spend next year at the other school. The great advantage of participating if you've already graduated from this school, is first of all, you have a base of operations in Paris or Johannesburg, or we can talk about the Barcelona program too. So you get to live and work overseas, which is a big advantage. The truth is that our students, the people who've already graduated from Columbia, really don't need additional journalism education. You know, we like to think we're the best in the world at this, but it gives you a base of operations to do journalism overseas and to study things like international relations or North African studies or European history at Sciences Po, or Southern African issues at WITS and these other places. So I'll be happy to talk to you about it as we wrap up.
Great, thank you.
I am going to say thank you very, very much to all of our faculty members who joined us this morning. And I'm going to invite our student panelists to join us.
Okay, my name is Brett Sione. As you heard, I'm the Associate Director of Admissions and Financial Aid for the Journalism School. And now we want to give you the opportunity to hear from some students who are currently going through some of the things that you just heard from the faculty. And then again, they'll tell you about their experiences, and then from there, open up the floor to questions. And so this is your opportunity to find out what it's like to be a student and ask them directly what it's like. So be thinking of those questions, and we'll definitely have time and open it up in just a little bit. But first, I'll just ask them to go right down the line and just introduce themselves, where you're from, and which program you were in.
Hi, my name is Noriana Fernando. I'm from Colombo, Sri Lanka. I'm in the MS full-time Stabile Investigative Program here at Columbia. I got started in August, and it's been a whirlwind of, 4 months. And I graduated from Ithaca College upstate in May and came right here to grad school. I started off as a pre-med biochemistry major and switched into journalism because I fell in love with it, and also it's in my blood. My mom was a journalist in Sri Lanka, where journalism is very different than it is here in the United States. I did have reporting experience coming in, but most of it was in broadcast. I have found myself delving into foreign land here by trying out the data classes, and I think that's one of the best decisions I've made here at Columbia.
My name is Lauren Prince. I'm actually in the part-time program. I work full-time at NBC News, actually, so I'm here as often as I can be, but with a part-time schedule. So you can imagine it's a lot to balance. But this program actually makes it very feasible for part-time students to be able to kind of conquer two worlds at one time, being a full-time professional in any industry, and then also being here. So I'm happy to answer any questions about what that balance looks like.
Hi everybody, I'm Francesca. I'm from Italy, I'm from the northwest of the country, and I moved to the US in 2011. I used to work for an Italian newspaper here in a newsroom for 3 years, and then I went to Detroit and fell in love with the city, and I wrote a book about Detroit last year. And I think I applied to Columbia. I never studied journalism before, and I wanted to bring my career to a next step, so this is why I'm here. And my concentration is in politics, but more or less the program is for all the MA courses is kind of similar, so I will be happy to answer any question.
Thanks. So for each of you, you're in 3 different programs. If you could describe a day in your life of whether it's work, school, what that entails in 200 words or less or thereabouts. Just give everybody a quick little snapshot as to what your day might be like, whether you're coming to class, going out reporting, or in your case, having to work as well. So just if you could each just kind of describe a day in the life of a Columbia student, at least through your eyes.
Well, my days, they can be really, it's this nice mix of journalism and student life. You can wake up and quickly turn in an essay due in the next hour, and then, go out to the Bronx or Queens and do reporting for a Supreme Court assignment that you have due for your reporting class, and then come back and work on a data assignment, and then go to this amazing lecture that the Tao Center is putting on from 6 to 8 p.m., and then maybe meet with the group project that you have due in a few weeks. So it's really a variety of things, but at the end of the day, I've walked out of every day feeling like I've learned something new, whether it be about journalism or about the people and how to interact with people. Yeah.
Before I answer that, how many of you are actually looking at the part-time program, just so I can gauge? Okay, actually a fair amount of you. Okay, so if you think about a normal day when you're working a full-time job, take that and then also add into it a couple of hours of classwork. It seems like a lot. Again, this program actually is it makes it very feasible for students to be able to do, to work full-time and also be here, but the idea of a typical day doesn't really exist. In my case, I work at the breaking news desk, so one thing that makes this experience particularly interesting is that I may be sitting at the desk doing or working on a breaking news story, especially this week with everything that's happened in San Bernardino. I may be working on something like that, and then I'll be coming to class and I'll be talking to other students, whether they're part-time or they're full-time. And it's an interesting juxtaposition because there is a lot of application of what's happening in real time with the news industry and with journalism, but also juxtaposing that from students at various levels of experience. Right now I'm actually taking a data class, so that's been very interesting to try and juxtapose what I'm doing there with data, because I've never had a data background before. By the way, everybody that I work with says that they wish that they had a data background, so plugs for that. It's actually really beneficial to have that kind of a program here and have somebody that's able to sit with you and walk through data so that you can really enhance your own reporting. Sorry, that was definitely more than 200 words.
That's
but
okay.
They're just interesting as a typical day.
So I start from the night. I go to sleep very tired every day, but I get up kind of happy also every day. Our day is more like around campus, so we do less work on the field. We spend a lot of time here. We have a variety of classes, and we study together. Our class is kind of small. There are 16 people, and we are very all close to each other, so we study a lot together. We have group assignment. So we have a couple of classes that are our main seminar during the week, and then other courses. But basically, yes, we spend a lot of time here around campus, which is a good thing for me. I like it.
So for a lot of the people in the audience or watching the live stream at home, they may be in a place where they're deciding if this is the right decision for them, if this is something that they want to do. And maybe you were sitting in this audience at one point last year or prior thinking the same thing. So what ultimately was it for you, if anything, that made you decide this is what I want to do, come to Columbia and be a student at the J School here?
It was definitely a decision for me, because of the money, and also because of the fact that I already had a journalism degree. I had many people that I talked to tell me, you don't want 2 degrees in journalism, you don't want a degree in journalism. So it was definitely a battle in my mind, and if I could go back to those people and tell me, please be careful of the advice you give, because I'm learning so much here that I didn't know before, and that is also complementing my previous degree. And also, I think the contacts were a huge part of it. I knew coming in that once I graduate from here, there'd be this network of alumni just waiting to help me, waiting to give me advice, even if it's not a job advice, that I wouldn't be able to get elsewhere. So I think the network and the contacts were huge in my decision to apply here.
I should back up and say that before I was at NBC, I was actually a poli-sci dork, for lack of a better word. I was obsessed with the whole political game. I had worked on a couple of different campaigns, and then I had a pause in that line of work where I realized that what I really wanted to pursue was journalism, and I was really fortunate to find my way into NBC News. But even after being there for 2 years, there was a part of me that was like, because I don't have a traditional journalism background, some of that serves to my benefit, but at the same time, there's a huge part of the industry that is really exciting to learn through a classroom experience because it's like a lawyer practicing law. It's not a done deal. It's a living, breathing industry. It's always changing. Part of the game is being ahead of the curve. And whether you're a competitive person or not, it's always interesting to know where those trends are heading and how different types of stories kind of warrant different types of platforms. Some stories don't float on a video platform, and there are a lot of stories that may only work in print. There are some stories that may be really engaging with a new type of social media aspect to it. And that was a majority of the reason why I decided to come back, was because I wanted to really stretch those muscles and learn more about how things are changing. I should say that a couple of weeks ago was actually pretty exciting. There was an event here that hosted a bunch of different organizations that are kind of on the cutting edge of different types of social media and digital media. And it was great because I got to attend both as a student, but also because of my role at NBC. And that was a really, really good example of being able to not just take advantage of the classroom aspect of being here, but also I don't want to say networking because that makes it sound like you're always looking for somebody to, give you a favor, but really just like understanding what other organizations are doing too. It's always refreshing to see what your competitors are doing or to see if there are opportunities to learn and grow from what other people are doing. And also to see if there are examples to learn from that may not have worked out so well. So that was a huge contribution to why I decided to come, and I'm actually very, very happy that I did come. This summer during the reporting class, that was especially exciting for me because since I didn't have a journalism background before, when you take that reporting kind of one-on-one class, you do learn a lot more about different types of formats. That's really, really, really valuable because I think a lot of employers now are also looking for somebody who can be talented on a variety of different platforms, and you really do get that here. Even though you do focus on one platform a little bit more than the rest, you do get experience in audio, which is huge right now. Podcasts are just a major, major, major thing for a lot of organizations right now. You get a lot of writing experience, which you can never get enough experience writing. You always want to have people that are willing to sit with you and to talk through what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. And somebody mentioned earlier the fact that you can make mistakes here and it's okay. That's definitely true, and you want that before you step into another career. If you step into like another organization, you want to be able to have kind of the classroom experience to make those mistakes and grow from them.
So, as I told you before, I didn't study journalism before. I learned on the ground, working in a newsroom. So this is the main reason why I decided to come back to school. But I applied just here at Columbia for this particular MA program because I wanted to deepen my analytical skill, and it is really what I'm getting from here. I also wanted to get new professional tools, and this is another thing I'm getting here. We have a course in data journalism. We are really learning how to look at big data set and how to clean them, how to get stories, how to find stories out of them. And we are also learning how to what to borrow from other disciplines, let's say sociology, ethnography, or oral history. So I wanted, yes, to bring my career to the next step, and I think it will be the case. I hope so. I also wanted to find a way to, let's say, to get in contact with the American job market, which is also something that Columbia is helping me to do. So there is a career service office, which is very helpful. And of course, before applying, I was kind of scared for the money, etc. But also the admission office is very helpful to find scholarships. There is a bunch of scholarship available, and they are really good in helping you to find the right one. So I found one. So yes. This is,
So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a snapshot and some insight into the thought process with the students and what they're going through now and what their experience is like and hopefully that generated some questions or some things that you were thinking about. So I would just like to open it up and ask anybody who wants to ask our students anything to just step up to the mic in the center aisle, and we'll take one at a time. Sure, go right ahead.
Hi, my name is Paula. I was asking another question earlier. My big question for you is, what is the culture here like? I'd imagine it's very competitive. Maybe I'm wrong. And I also wanted to know, is it collaborative?
Well, I think that's a fear that I had coming into, Columbia Journalism School. It's going to be competitive, even cutthroat. And I would say that it's healthy competition that has driven me to want to work harder. You look at, a professor saying, nice job to your classmate, and you're like, I want that. So I think it's definitely been healthy competition that's driven me to good places. I haven't seen any of that cutthroatness that I was expecting, and it's definitely collaborative. It forces you to be collaborative. You have group projects, yes, but also you walk into this building and you immediately see 5 people who are in the same boat as you. So even if it's just venting about this project that's due, it's automatically collaborative. And even if that's something you haven't done before, I think there's so much to learn from it and enjoy. Yeah.
I would say, especially with the part-time class, the group of us really got to know each other pretty well over the summer. And I feel like having that kind of a bond is really maybe unique for not necessarily a grad program, but here it's a huge university, and it's really nice that I have a couple of people that, I'm constantly in contact that I can relate to with, like, oh, are you stressed about this thing? How are you doing on this deadline? Like, it's nice to have that. So I think I kind of agree with what you were saying. There is an element of, like, healthy competition, but at the same time, I've actually found that more than the competition, there is kind of like a compassion and camaraderie. There were several times in the original reporting class where somebody would say, like, or give a pitch in class, and somebody would be like, oh, you've got to talk to my friend that does this thing. And, like, immediately you'd have a story because you were only one person removed from, like, the story that you actually needed for the assignment. And I think that's pretty unique. I don't know that necessarily happens at other news organizations. It's probably more competitive there than it is here, but that's really unique, and I really, really enjoyed that people were willing to kind of roll out the carpet for you and fold you into their lives in that way and give contacts like that.
Yes, I would say the same. It's super collaborative, and not only among students, but also with professors. And my class in particular, we are 16, as I said, and we are from all over the world. So there are just a couple of students that are from the United States. All the others are from different countries. And we are really becoming kind of the family here. So we are really taking care of us. And yes, absolutely, we help each other for everything. We are also, all of us, we are professionals, so we all have our jobs, our connection, our collaboration with our other media, so we are really not competitive at all.
Thank you. And I had one more question. I'm interested in the MS Investigative Program. Could you just talk a little bit about what that program is like?
Absolutely. So when I first came, I don't think there was much of a difference for Stabile students, except that we were placed in the same reporting class. And I think my reporting section was the only one that covered the court systems in New York. So other than that, the first few weeks, there was no real difference. But mid-September, we started taking a Stabile investigative course every Wednesday nights. And that's when things really started to pick up. We learned interviewing techniques from a private investigator. We had people who are FOIA experts come in and tell us about their FOIA disease. I had this gentleman who submits a FOIA request every day just by habit, and we really had people come to inspire us. I think that's been a huge part of it, but I think the master's project that we turn in at the end of this year has to be investigative. That's another difference. So in that, it uncovers some kind of wrongdoing, exposes some hypocrisy, so it will require a lot of groundwork, maybe investigating records and then going out to talk to people, and you'd have to have an investigative hypothesis. So I think those are the biggest differences between the Stabile program and the general program.
Thank you.
If you don't mind me stepping back on the previous question that you had asked, there was one thing that I don't think any of us have mentioned, and that's the professors, like the culture with the professors too. The professor that I had for the first half of this term was actually, all of the professors are great, but I think this one example really stands out in my mind as like what caliber of compassion you're talking about with the professors here. He opened his house to all students in his classes, previous and current, for Thanksgiving because he wasn't sure if anybody was going home. Sounds like a small gesture, but I thought that was really neat that at a university of this size, you'd have a professor that would open his, home to students like that. So if you want to talk about culture, I think that's a pretty good example of what you're going to get here.
My name is Spiridon, and I graduated with a degree in history and then got hired by a news organization. And it was, as you guys can probably relate, it's quite a shock when you don't have any formal training on how to conduct a proper interview or turn in things on a deadline and stuff. So just a before and after picture. I mean, the comfort level, I mean, how much does it improve when you get this formal training and, and the quality of the work? Like, how much does it improve? And one more question is, why Detroit?
Because it's super interesting. It's really, to understand this country is a great place.
Right.
But for your previous question, I would say that even if I was already working as a journalist, I really feel that I changed a lot in the first 3 months. I really learned how to conduct properly an interview, how to write avoiding biases, how to look at data, which is really important because I used to look at the data other organization gave to me, so I was not able to question those data, and now I am. So this is really empowering for our job. And yes.
Okay. No, I'm saying go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. One thing I was going to say, there's a center here called the Dart Center, which it may be kind of an example of what you're talking about. One thing that they are really wonderful at is their specialty is really in trauma and how you report around traumatic experiences, which, just look at the front page of the New York Times today, it's all about trauma. It's all about, what's happening in the world, and most of it is very negative. One thing that I think has really enhanced my personal reporting is having a resource like that, because that's really taught me in terms of interviews, when I'm picking up the phone and I'm calling the family of somebody who may have witnessed an attack, it's great to have the kind of training to be sensitive to that. It's not just like, what kinds of questions are you asking? It's, how are you asking them? Have you thought through what they've been through? Have you thought about, the best way to try and get this question? Do you really need to ask that? And so, yes, I think that my personal reporting has definitely elevated a lot by having resources like that. And all the professors teach other things too, but that's just a good example of like how that's folded into my almost every single, everyday job by being here.
In terms of, I did have some experience coming in. I have to say that up front, but it was more breaking news experience in college reporting and coverage. My program here has taught me to ask the investigative questions and not ask them like questions, to have a conversation about them with people, and even not just with people, with documents. Like when you have a document in front of you, how do you question that document? What are you looking for? What are the key words? What about the number of words, the frequency of words? And I think asking the harder questions and making you realize then they don't have to be as hard is a huge part of my experience here. Yep.
Okay. We just have a couple more minutes, and we'll try to get through these few remaining. So if you have one question, want to pose it to somebody specific.
My name's Louise. I'm interested in the MS program. I guess my main question is, I came in with experience reading the Columbia Journalism Review, and I was wondering what role student publications play in your experience.
When you say in terms of publication, the things that the students may produce while they're here?
Yeah, and I don't know, just do any of you write for CJR, or like what experience you have with that, or just how much are you publishing, because obviously, I came from writing for my undergrad publication, and what kind of access do you have to that? Are you trying to freelance while you're working? How much of what the things you're producing in your classes are you trying to get published?
And you're interested in the full-time program?
Yeah.
Well, I don't write for CJR. I don't think that's an option for students. However, CJR is offering a magazine class next semester. So I think next year you might have the option of taking that. But in terms of getting involved in things going on in the school, I think that's a conscious decision that you have to make because it is a time commitment. And I'm the co-president of the South Asian Journalists Association here. I work for the international director at the school. And those are things that have kind of got me exposed to the behind the scenes of Columbia. And about your question on getting published, it's something you have to deliberately work on. There are no publications within the school that you can get published in, at least to my knowledge. So be it something like Metro, or if you have contacts at, I don't know, The Guardian somewhere, work those contacts, refine your stories, go to professors and say, how can I improve this? Be ready to take criticism. And then I think publication just manifests at the end of it.
Yeah, and there's ways you'll be able to work on projects, especially your master's thesis project, and again, working with professors who know people in the business, and that sort of thing. So it's not like you're producing things on a daily basis that you're going to have to publish somewhere in order to graduate and that sort of to that level, but there will be opportunities, and especially at the end when you're doing your master's thesis, as Professor Wiener said, all of the MA students, for example, they are working on those things and getting things published when it comes to that point especially. Yep. Two more.
Hi, I'm interested in investigative programs, so I have a question for Narayana. So how many stories do you cover every week? And when you cover video stories, do you work as a MMJ?
Well, investigative stories inherently take more time. So my investigative reporting class, we weren't producing stories every week. It was just not realistic to produce an investigative story every week. We were covering court stories, so we had 3 court daybook stories that were due by the end of the semester, but our final project was this one long investigative piece that you had to stumble upon and find. And that way you get to develop a beat and develop your sources too. So that's what the investigative class looked like for me. And so what was your second question?
And do you do any video stories?
Video stories, you have the option of doing them, but so far you have the option of taking a skills class in video, then you have the option of you are required to do photo and audio, but the real video comes into play the second semester. Yeah.
Gotcha, thanks.
And our final question.
So for those of you who have done audio work, can you speak to the robustness of the audio curriculum here and the experience? Do you feel like it would prepare you for working in a place like NPR and to do the type of interviewing where the final product is the interview and it's not just the background work?
Definitely. Sure, I can talk about that. So I'm actually not focusing in audio reporting as my specialty, but this summer the professor that I had for audio was actually a former executive producer for WNYC here. So you're talking about high caliber instructors first of all. You're also loaned out a lot of really great equipment here to be able to test a lot of things, and they let you kind of play around with some of the technology too, which I think is pretty unique, especially when you're talking about audio. You want to see the difference between using an audio recorder or an iPhone, things like that. You do get kind of experience in those kind of fundamentals. But the audio concentration here is definitely intense, and I remember them saying something in that original reporting class that a pretty high number of students that do focus on the audio end up having pretty stellar careers. I know there have been a lot of people that have been affiliated with NPR that have come through here particularly, but there's also a huge drive right now towards podcasts, which is also really interesting. So I think there's a lot of kind of the long form audio training here too, which is more than the newscast. It's enterprising things like Serial or things of that nature. So yeah, it's pretty wonderful.
I just want to add 2 quick things. I misspoke when I said the audio doesn't kick in until next semester. You can choose to have it kick in this semester. I just chose to have data instead. So there's video 1 and video 2 that you can take this semester as well. Yeah. And also, if anyone wants to get in touch with me, my email is snf2116. That's Sam Nancy French 2116 at columbia.edu. So please write me with any questions.
I'll also just add a comment about the NPR question. We've got quite a few of the faculty who are here are NPR people. So Ann Cooper, who teaches a lot of the video and broadcast kinds of things, works also with international programs, former NPR bureau chief in Johannesburg. She has also worked for NPR in the Soviet Union, or the former Soviet Union. The radio workshop course that's taught here is an NPR style course, so you're definitely receiving that kind of training.
Thank you so much.
And also for DMA, if anyone is interested, I'm gonna stay here for a while. If you want to ask me some question, or if you want to shoot me an email, is fb2441@columbia.edu.
And I can give mine really quickly. It's just lauren.prince@columbia.edu.
Okay, great. Yeah, and if they're able to stay, afterwards, I'm sure they would be available to speak with anyone who wants to speak with them one-on-one. But if you could thank them for taking time out of their schedules to be with us, and then I'll bring up Gina Boubion from our Career Services Office, who will speak to you a little bit about those student services. No, not yet, though. We'll be back with you in 1 second.
All right, where to go? I don't want the video, I just want the PowerPoint. While I'm plugging this in, so Francesca's from Turin, which is the auto manufacturing part of Italy, and there's your answer, why she's obsessed with Detroit. And that's why you need a career services person to help you put your narrative together. Does make sense. Fiat is there. Okay. Okay. So good morning, nice to see you. I'm Associate Director of Career Services here at the J School, and I'm part of a small but tenacious team of former journalists who help our students land in the job market. You can read our detailed bios if you're interested on the website. So I thought this morning I would just talk to you about the journalism job market as we see it, and also how our students do in the job market. But first a reality check. There's no guarantee of a job in journalism. It's not like other fields, so just know that. On the other hand, we don't know what the job market's going to be doing in May 2016. It's quite a long ways off. We don't know what companies are going to bite the dust between now and then. We don't know what companies will launch. We don't know what companies will reinvent themselves successfully and find new life. It's a very exciting time to be a journalist, however. There are a lot of really important stories that need to be told, and a lot of really new and interesting ways to tell those stories. So regardless of the flux in the journalism industry, regardless of what the broader economy seems to be doing, Columbia graduates do really well in the job market, not just immediately after graduation, but in years down the line. So I'm going to share with you some statistics from the class of 2015. So you can have a bigger picture of how Columbia students do, and also just a good picture of what's happening in the job market. So this first table, oh shoot, it's hard to see, so I'm going to have to talk it through. With 100% of the class reporting, as of graduation day, 74% of the class has something lined up. And that's a broad category that includes jobs, internships, students going back to school for another degree, students launching serious journalism, freelance careers, and so forth. And a few students who want to launch media companies of their own. So divided up another way, 77% of the MAs had something upon graduation. And the MAs are a special situation. These are experienced journalists who are typically looking for full-time jobs, and full-time jobs take a little longer to find than like an internship or a fellowship. And the MAs typically get pretty good jobs, and I'll be talking about about that a little bit later. 72% of the MS students had jobs, and then there were some fluctuations, like a higher number of U.S. citizens had something lined up, a lower number of international students had something lined up, but we're talking about a sample database of 300 people, so 1% equals 3 people. So what that means is this sort of shifts every year. In 2014, the international students did actually a little bit better than the U.S. citizen permanent green card holders. Then in 2014, and then 2015 it flipped. So we don't really know what will happen. And then an interesting factoid: 100% of the native Spanish speakers found something. It's important for you to understand that these figures are gleaned from information we get from the students around graduation. This is important because we are the only professional school at Columbia University that takes that measurement right around graduation. Everybody else waits many months later. So the law school, for instance, takes its tally 11 months out after graduation, and it's 97, 98%. The business school waits 3 months, and it's also really impressive. We do it when we do it because we know we're going to get 100% reporting, because we don't hand out graduation tickets for families until you tell us what you're doing. So that's how we get 100%. So I'm just heads up, as you look at other schools and other degree programs, you need to interrogate the data. If you find data on their website, you need to ask the questions that you're entitled to know the answers to. When did they take their tally? What percent of the graduating class is in that data set? And when, when they, as of when, at the end date. Okay. This is an interesting chart, and I don't know if you can see it. So you can probably see the colors, okay? So I'm going to just tell you what this says. From 2010 to 2015, we saw shifts in the distribution of kinds of jobs that students got. So I'll just go from the top on down. The red line is the 32% of the class of 2015 that got jobs in digital-only companies. Right below that, the purple line is 28%. Those are students who got positions in broadcast companies, including the online staff. Right below that, it's a blue line. That's the newspaper line. Newspaper plus digital, plus the .com side of the paper. The green line is magazine, which you can see a downward trend there. And that was 12%. And at the bottom, that's the wire service line. A lot of our students like to work at wire services, and that also looks like it's going down, but I have a comment on that. So what we're seeing over time is a steady rise in digital-only companies that are, giving jobs and internships to students, which completely makes sense. We all get that. But this also shows some. It shows stability in the newspaper world. This sort of shows you that newspapers aren't actually dying; they're doing okay. They're surviving the transition to online. This also shows you that the ascendancy of video, the importance of video in the job market, and it also shows you that the magazine jobs are kind of there's definitely a downward trajectory there, and that's for a couple of reasons. A lot of magazines, especially monthlies, haven't made that great of a transition to the digital world, but also there's this huge number of news sites that hire students who are voicey, who write with voice, who write long form. And so our students who, in the days of like 5 years ago, who would have been magazine concentrators, now they're getting jobs at Vice and BuzzFeed and Jezebel and Stat News and places like that, digital-only kinds of platforms. And the wire service line, not really sure if it's a trend. We need to see what happens next year, because it isn't that big of a number. So, with wire, we have a lot of students who go to AFP and the Associated Press and Reuters and Bloomberg. That's what that number is. Okay. So this is really interesting, I think. Oh shoot, again, you can't see it that well. So I'm gonna walk it through. No matter what the platform is that students the students join, 63% of our students say that text reporting was their main duty. Now their secondary duty might be video or data, but their main duty is reporting and writing. And then the next number down is 21%. That is the number of students who said their main duty is video. And that's interesting. These are students who are hired just to shoot, video and produce video. These video jobs are all over the place. They're not only at the big networks, they're at the video departments of newspapers, and they're in digital-only publications. So is anybody here interested in on-air reporting? A couple? Okay. Well, so that's a small number, 3%. Then there's a reason for that. On-air reporting jobs tend to take you to small towns, and a lot of students come to Columbia, they fall in love with New York City, and they don't really feel like going to Alaska or Charlotte, and that's the reality. But those are where those jobs are. So we do have students who do that, and they have fantastic careers, and the road back to New York is often quicker if you go to a small town to sharpen your skills and learn the ropes, and that goes for print as well. So we imagine that these statistics will shift quite a lot in the next few years. We've only got a few students who said their main job was data development and stuff like that. That's because, well, we didn't have that many students, majoring in that and concentrating in that last year, and we have many more this coming year. So we expect that will that'll change. So this is a chart that I definitely need some explanation. So these are students who went into journalism after graduation, and that seems like such a strange thing to say. But we do have a small percent of students who decide, for whatever reason, that they want to go to another degree program. Or students who decide to leave journalism and go do something else. It's not a big number, but it's enough. So I felt like the takeaway I wanted you to see with this chart is that the big purple chunk is people who got internships as opposed to jobs, and the red slice is full-time jobs. So that has been the case for years. This is not a big new thing for the class of 2015. This has been true like the whole time I've been here, 9 years at Columbia. And I'll tell you, we love internships. Internships are things that are jobs that our top students apply for and get and are happy about, because an internship is usually going to be your best shot to leapfrog ahead to that major news organization and start your postgraduate career at the big brand names. That's how you break in. So we feel like internships are fantastic results from J School. An internship is often a job tryout as well. So employers look at grad students differently in internship programs. They know that you're free at the end of the summer, so they're eyeing you with that in mind. They're hoping it works out, the intern is hoping it works out, and oftentimes it does work out. There are some companies that really have a habit of never hiring their summer interns, but everybody wants those internships anyway, and they do you well in your career. Companies that in this category include the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Associated Press. So obviously you want those internships, and everything will settle out, even if they don't hire you. There's a much longer list of companies that love to hire their summer interns and use their summer internship as their farm team. Reuters, Time Inc., all the magazines at Time Inc., the Miami Herald, the Wall Street Journal. It's a long list. So I wanted just to show you this picture. Okay. So you have a handout somewhere in your folder. You don't have to bring it out now, but it's a list of the more than 120 companies that hired a J School grad from the class of 2015. What I'm showing you here is the concentration of J School talent in some of the biggest, most desirable companies in the news industry. The talent of our students and the power of the Columbia brand is what you're seeing here. Reuters and Vice each hired 6 people from the class of 2015. The question from the veteran earlier made me remember there's this competition called the Overseas Press Club Foundation. It is an essay competition that awards money to students who want to become foreign correspondents. And oftentimes our veterans want to be foreign correspondents, and so they compete really successfully for this award. It's also a competition that the organization gives out about a dozen awards, and last year our students got 5 of them, and this happens like every year. So it's another competition that Columbia dominates year after year. So again, these figures are or as of graduation, okay? After graduation, it keeps happening. So just as an example, in June, an MA student was hired as a deputy foreign editor at Huffington Post. The New York Times hired another 4 people, a couple as news assistants, one as a researcher, one as a fact checker. The researcher's name is Jacqueline Williams. She's had a byline in the paper a lot in the last 6 weeks because she's been involved in this big investigative project on online illegal gambling. I don't know if anybody's noticed it, but that's her. So, she's been working with her professor on that story for a long, long time. Walt Bogdanich, who's another professor in the spring semester who runs an investigative workshop. And so she was in the Stabile program, and that's what she's been up to. In July, another couple MA students were hired at Politico's new operation in Brussels. One was German, who was hired to go back to Berlin and be their Berlin correspondent. One was an Italian who was hired to join the Brussels bureau covering healthcare. But what happened as soon as they got there? They covered the migration crisis 24/7. And then 2 weeks ago, they were covering the France terrorist attacks from both locations. So it's exciting times in interesting ways. So a couple weeks ago, also, I heard from another couple MA students who were both arts and culture students. And one had wanted to just let us know that she had been hired as a weekend editor at Vice, and another had been hired as the senior online editor at SmithsonianMagazine.com in Washington, D.C. Okay, who wants to hear about pay? This is the sticking point. So, you don't go into journalism to become rich. However, there are livable salaries to be had in journalism these days. Now, internship pay, I'm giving you the 2 numbers because internship pay is something that's very typical for our students, and there's a low of $7.50 an hour, and that is very low. The high from the class of 2015 was $1,000 a week. The typical pay is more sort of, $500 to $700 a week. These are temporary. They don't last. They go for 4 weeks to 12 weeks, and then you get, a better pay. Students who took full-time jobs upon graduation were getting, 35 to 50K with benefits. We feel like what we've seen is a definite improvement in salaries. We saw several students make a lot more than 50. And 5 years ago, that wasn't the case. 5 years ago also, fewer students were being offered benefits. So there seems to be some improved health in the journalism industry. The top, one of the students was offered $90,000 to be a section editor at a business publication. A digital reporter at a Spanish language publication was offered $60 and accepted, and a video producer at an online company was offered $70. So these are outliers, but there were more outliers, is what I'm saying, than in past years. Okay, so do your research on LinkedIn. You can get so much information on LinkedIn. So I did this myself, and I just want to talk about BuzzFeed for a minute. So BuzzFeed has been doing serious journalism for the last 3 years. They started out luring you in with those, listicles, and then they hooked you, and now they've got all this investigative journalism going on. So they've hired award-winning editors to run reporting teams, and we have a lot of students at BuzzFeed, a lot of grads. So if you look at the BuzzFeed's World Team masthead, which I was looking at during the France attacks, I counted 16 people on the World masthead, and 6 of them were J-School grads from the last few years. So we have a lot of our grads have very cool jobs at BuzzFeed, including deputy foreign editor in London, national editor, the business editor, the Moscow correspondent, the worldwide LGBT reporter, the human rights reporter, the immigration reporter, the criminal justice reporter, the tech reporter, the France editor, and the Americas editor. So that's just BuzzFeed. The rest of this slide shows you, I just basically went through the LinkedIn group called Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism, and you can do the same thing for any school you're interested in applying to. You can do it for your undergrad too. And just count. when I made my count, 65 plus people at the New York Times, these are going to be undercounts because not everybody wants to join the LinkedIn group. I excluded people who said they were freelancing, who said they were bloggers, who said they were contributors. I only counted people who reported that they had, what sounded like a job title, at a publication or a TV station. And for the person who asked about NPR, we've got 17 people there. And we also have a bunch of people at PBS NewsHour. We have a lot of people at WNYC. We've got a little cabal of people up at the public radio station in Boston. So they're spread out. Okay, let's talk about the terrorist attacks in France, because this is just one news story that gave the school the opportunity to see just how deeply embedded our students are in these events. So no matter where news breaks, Columbia is there. And as the attacks were unfolding, we began to see familiar names popping up in the coverage. It was pretty impressive. So this is very hard to read, so I'm going to just tell you what it says. At least 5 grads at BuzzFeed are contributing to the coverage of the France attacks, and then I named them. And then for ABC, Louise DeWast is reporting. For Politico Europe, Janos and Julia. For Vice, Tess. For the New Yorker, Ben. For the New York Times, Hannah. For Reuters, China. There were others. Daniele for Al Jazeera, Nick for the BBC. It was a long list, and I'm sure I'm missing people. These are just names that I recognize from the last several years of graduation. So I thought it would be helpful. There was a question from somebody who asked about before and after. So I've taken apart of just a few people's career trajectories just to show you, and hopefully you can see yourself somewhere. So these are the students who did the coverage in France. Those are all mostly French nationals and European students from abroad. And so I just sort of focused on 3 of them to give you a sense. So Cecile was an intern at Le Monde before Columbia, and then she came to Columbia, and then she got hired at Slate as an intern in France, and then they made her full-time, and then she was hired by BuzzFeed, and now she runs the BuzzFeed France desk. And I love this fact because the person who hired her would have also been a Columbia grad, Marie, another French student who works in New York and now is the Americas editor, or the international editor. Anoop Kafle was from Nepal. He went to a tiny college in Tennessee, and he applied to a lot of jobs from Tennessee, and he didn't get anything. And then he applied to Columbia, he got in, and then he was hired at Forbes when he told them, I'm going to Columbia Journalism School. So that's what he did before his summer, before he started at Columbia. Then after Columbia, he was hired as a web intern at The Atlantic in their fellowship program, which is very competitive. They put him in a room with 10 people and had them go at it. And then he was hired at the Washington Post, and he was an editor at the Washington Post, and he is now in London as BuzzFeed's deputy foreign editor. Louise was from Sciences Po, and she came to Columbia from immediately having done a video job at a publication called Le Point. And then she got the multimedia AP internship in France, and now she's at ABC News. So we have another big contingent here. It's career changers. So Columbia is a place that transforms people. We have quite a few career changers who come here to pursue their first love, journalism, or perhaps they found themselves in a field where they liked it, but they really feel like their purpose is to report on that field rather than be a part of that field. We definitely have a group of students who do that. And then we have students who want to just, who've been here for a few years, who've been working in journalism for a few years and want to ramp up their skills or shift gears. So our career changers, I'll give you some examples. So Vicky was an older student, and she had been a teacher at a prep school in the Bronx for years. And she came, but she was a journalist back in college, and that was her first love. So she came here and she interned at ABC in the spring semester, and she was a part-time student. And then she was hired as a researcher at PBS NewsHour. And then something happened, it ended, and she had to go back to her teaching job. But then PBS called her back and offered her her dream job, education editor for PBS NewsHour, and that's where she is in Washington. Alexandra was a younger student. She came straight from undergrad, and she also did journalism a long time, like between sophomore and junior year of college, and then left it aside and became a Teach for America fellow in Hawaii. So she developed a real passion for education and public education and U.S. education. So she got the the postgraduate fellowship in education reporting. So that's what she's doing. She's working on the Teachers Project. And then Kevin, we do always have several people from the finance industry who come here, and they want to write about finance or something else. Kevin was in the something else category. He was very entrepreneurial minded, and he was a senior financial analyst at a hedge fund. Then he came to Columbia, was quite good with data, had a bunch of economic, training, and he was hired as an intern at BuzzFeed on its data team. And now he is in the Tao Center, which is part of Columbia, because he got funding for this startup idea that he has, and that's what he's working on. So another big group here are students who come straight from undergrad. Typically, these students have worked on their college paper, not all the time though, but that it's very typical we get a lot of editors-in-chief here from undergrad. And so these are some recent grads. Ellen was the editor-in-chief of the Johns Hopkins newspaper. Then she came to Columbia, and then she got the internship at the Guardian U.S. doing breaking news, and that's still ongoing. Simon came from Sciences Po. Don't we think he had much in the way of journalism experience, not even for a student newspaper. But then he came here, and then he was very interested in environmental science, and he got an internship at Inside Climate News. And then he wanted to go to La Stampa in Turin because he's a dual national, U.S., Italy, but also he wanted to be there for the climate change talks. And so that's where he is right now. Melina was the editor-in-chief of her paper at in Florida, at a small liberal arts college in Florida. And then she came to Columbia, and then she got a cybersecurity reporting internship at this new publication of the Christian Science Monitor called Passcode. So that's it. Ask away. I will answer questions if you have any questions about any aspect of this.
Hi, I'm Preeti
Hi.
Singh. I've just recently started writing, and I'm trying to decide between the part-time course and the full-time course. And I think one of the primary things that would help me decide is essentially the kind of jobs that I could get after both. So my question to you is, do part-time students also get jobs at news organizations after they pass out? Or is the number higher for, let's say, a full-time course?
Well, okay, so the part-time students already have jobs, and there's a group of them, they do very well in the job market, and actually employers don't really differentiate. So it's a great program if it's going to work for you. A lot of the part-timers will hold on to their job, their current job, all the way through school, and then some. Because perhaps their employer helps pay for it, pay for the schooling, and they're beholden to, they need to go back, or they've got an employer who understands that they're in grad school and need to leave at 5 p.m. on certain days, and so we have students who stay in their jobs and then launch their search for a journalism job after graduation, and that happens. We have other part-time students who just make that transition during grad school, and it's really hard to do it, but they do it, like where they leave non-journalism and get a journalism job. We have other students who already have journalism jobs and do the part-time program, and then they go back to their same newsrooms and they get promoted, or that's like a typical scenario. So it just depends on what you need, in your life. Well, I must have been very thorough then. Okay, and I'll stick around if anybody has questions. Thanks a lot. Good luck.
Yeah, thanks for sticking with us. We just want to conclude with a few notes about the admission financial aid process. How many of you have already submitted an application for 2016? Anyone? Okay. How many of you have started one? Okay. How many of you haven't started one but still may? Okay. The deadline is December 15th, so keep that in mind. We're approaching that, but you definitely have time, whether you have yet to start one, whether you have started and are various points of completion but just haven't submitted it yet. Just keep in mind for the MS, MA, PhD programs, the deadline is December 15th. If you are interested in the dual degree with computer science, that application goes through the engineering school, not the journalism school, and the deadline for that is January 15th. So that program is a little bit different, but just keep that in mind. If you've seen the application already, I would encourage you to read the instruction page first before you do anything, if you have yet to start, or if you're in the process of doing it, just maybe review that, because that'll give you a pretty good description of what we would require with the application. It should be pretty simple, hopefully. If not, we're always here to help. But most of the materials you just upload with your application. Your college transcript, your resume, your writing samples, the essays, those all just get uploaded with the application with the push of a button. So that should be a pretty simple process. We do require 2 essays. If you are applying for one of our specializations in either the data specialization, documentary, or investigative, each of those would require a separate essay. So you could have anywhere from 2 to 4 or 5 essays, depending on what you're applying for. If you're applying for the Master of Science program, whether full-time, part-time, there is a writing test that we give. That is not part of the initial application process. So if you get all of your materials in, submit your application, you're applying for the MS program. After you submit the application, we will get information to you about the writing test. If you're local to New York City, you're applying for the MS, we will offer the test here on campus in January. The first few weekends of January, typically we'll offer those here on campus. If you're going to be somewhere else in the United States, around the world, if we have an alumni proctor in your area, we will share that information and you'll be able to set up a day and time with a proctor. If we don't have a proctor in your area, then we give you instructions how to find your own. And essentially, if it's not a family member or friend, in most cases, we'll be able to work with you and then the proctor, whomever you find on your own. So in terms of how that works, so you submit your application by the middle of December. We get information to you about the writing test if you're applying for the MS. We review applications after the first of the year, and we send all the decisions out in the middle of March. When we're doing our application reviews, we don't require the GRE for the Master of Science. If you're applying for the PhD or for the dual degree with computer science, that will require the GRE, but for the regular MA, MS, we do not. We don't have a minimum grade point average that we hold you to. You don't have to have a background in journalism, prerequisite classes at the undergraduate level. So there's a couple key things, and all of those things you have to submit in your essays, in your writing samples, what the recommenders say about you. There's 3 letters of recommendation that we require. So there's a few key things that we'll look for. Number 1 is your overall writing ability. Once you get here, we'll train you on the journalism part, but you really need to come in with at least, if you want to quote unquote, be a good writer, whatever that might mean for you. But, can you think clearly and critically, and what you've given us in your writing samples, your essays, can we see maybe a skill to be able to take all kinds of information and boil it down into something that the public can consume on a daily basis is really what a journalist does. Can we pick out certain things that a journalist needs to have in your writing? So we'll look for an overall ability to write. Whether it's journalism related, whether it's not, we'll just be able to try to pick that out, number 1. And number 2, why do you want to do this? You've heard from faculty about what classes are like. You heard from students about their experiences. You heard about career services and how we work with students. So based on all of that, why is this then a career that you want to pursue? Because if If you're doing, say, as an example, the MS full-time program, which is 10 months long, it's pretty intense. It's fast-paced. You're around New York City on a daily basis covering stories. So why is this a passion of yours? Why do you want to tell stories? Why do you want to talk to people? Why do you want to investigate things further? And what you tell us, can we pick those things out? So those are the things that we look for in an applicant. As you heard our students say, this is really a cohort of learners. People drive each other. You learn from each other. You learn from the faculty. So can we tell from what you've told us and what you've provided that this is something that you want to participate in and you want to help take the future of journalism to somewhere where it hasn't been before, and you want to be part of a new generation? As Professor Claytel said, we've been here now as a journalism school at Columbia for more than 100 years. So we want to be here for 100 more plus. So is this something where you can always look back and say, yeah, I'm an alum now, and I was here at a certain time, and I've taken my career to a different place than maybe where it was when I started, hopefully. And, is it something that you want to help carry 100 years of tradition to a second 100 years of tradition? So these are the things we'll try to pick out in an applicant. All that said, we work with you through the whole process. So if you have started, if you have questions, you're having any problems, please feel free to reach out to us. Just keep in mind that December 15th date is approaching, but you certainly have time to complete the process, start the process. All you have to do is go to our website. You'll see a button that says apply. You click it, and off you go. So it shouldn't be too much of a difficult process, hopefully, but we're here to help anywhere along the way. Dean Souders, I'll have her come up now, and she'll tell you a little bit about the financial aid process. As you hopefully may have found out, the scholarship application is now open, so she'll talk a little bit about that process and how we can help you reach your goals along those lines.
Thank you, Brett. We always save the best for last, the money. Columbia costs a lot of money. We know that. We'll just acknowledge that right up front. Students who join us fund the cost of their Columbia education using several different methods. One, personal funds. The second, journalism school scholarship funds. The third is other outside scholarship funds that they find. And the fourth, for U.S. citizens and permanent residents, is federal financial aid, so federal student loans. I always encourage people to start planning right now on the financial side, because you need to start doing research. You need to have a plan for how you're going to pay for the cost of the tuition and fees when you get here. I also suggest that people think about tuition and fees. The tuition and fees they can't do anything about. That doesn't change. The place where you do have some ability to control your expenses is in the housing expenses, your housing and living expenses. Students who come to the journalism school generally find apartments together, either with other journalism students or other students here at Columbia. There are apartments that pass from journalism students to journalism students to journalism students each year. I know of at least one apartment that goes from veterans to veterans to veterans. So there are a lot of different possibilities. But the best thing is to look at your budget, figure out what you're going to need, what you have, and what you have to figure out how you're going to get that. The journalism school does offer scholarships. We have scholarships for the MS and the MA programs, which range from $500 to full cost of attendance. I will tell you that I think I've got 3 scholarships that cover the full cost of attendance. 2 are in the MA Business program. 1 is in the MA Politics program. And then I've got some others that cover usually about 2/3 of the costs for a couple of really lucky MS students. So you need to, when you're thinking about scholarships, figure that, you know, the average award this year was about $20,000 for MS students. So that gives you sort of a baseline for what you need to plan for. Everybody should apply for journalism school scholarships. I have my deepest pool of funds there is not restricted at all. So domestic students, permanent residents of the United States, international students, anybody can apply for those funds. But you must submit the scholarship application. So it's open, take a look at it. Once you've got your admissions application taken care of, you've got another about 6 weeks, 6 or 8 weeks to take care of the scholarship application. Do it. I don't care how many other things you have on your plate, do it, because February 1st is the scholarship application deadline for the J School. And if you submit your scholarship application after that, I can't guarantee that you're going to be considered for scholarship funding. Take a look also on the website. We've got, on the Financing Your Education section of the website, we've got a big spreadsheet of outside scholarships that we have put together. They are scholarships that students have brought with them in other years. They're scholarships that we have done research to find. We have also gone to the websites of other journalism schools and other schools here at Columbia, other universities outside of Columbia. Anything that we could find that we thought that a journalism student could apply for is there. And that list grows each year. So take a look at that. Those of you who are US citizens and permanent residents, file your FAFSAs. They're available on January 1st. File them because to be considered for scholarships, US citizens and permanent residents, you must file both the FAFSA and the journalism school scholarship application. Another thing about the journalism school scholarship application, in addition to completely unrestricted funds, I have funding for things like people who live in Washington, D.C., people who are from Venezuela, people who are from Oregon, from Ohio, people who are interested in community newspapers, people who want to work in political reporting, science reporting, arts and culture reporting, people who want to do sports reporting, and especially golf. So if there are any people out there who love golf, who do golf reporting, please, please apply for my golf scholarship. So there are lots and lots of different things. They all depend on the particular interest of the person who was generously giving the funding. Go into the scholarship application, check off all the boxes that apply to you so that we know that we should take a look at you for whichever categories of funding we have. That's pretty much what I have to say about scholarships and financial aid. Again, do your planning ahead of time. It breaks my heart when somebody gets in contact with me in March, April, May, June, July to say, you know, I was so busy, I had so many deadlines, I just couldn't get that scholarship application done. Can I still do it? And of course, my answer is always, yes, you can file it, but I've already given away all the money. So file by the deadline. This is a deadline-driven place. All right, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. Please use the microphone. Also, we'll take any questions that you have about the application process, anything that you've got there. Go ahead and go up to the microphone. I see we've got several questions. And if there are any of you on the live stream who have questions, please let Brett know, and he will bring the question up. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, Hi, I'm from the Philippines. December 15 is fast approaching. Do we focus first on the application process before we proceed to the process of application for the scholarship?
That's what I would do.
Yeah.
Take care of the admissions application first for the December 15th application deadline. Another note there, the dual degree program with computer science has a January 15th deadline. Everything else is December 15th.
Can I take another question? What about the English for foreign students?
English language or English proficiency. If English is not your first language, you, in almost all cases, must take either the TOEFL or the IELTS, which is the British Council exam. If you speak another language besides English as your native language or as your first language, but you attended university at an English medium university and did all of your undergraduate studies in English, you do not have to take the TOEFL or the IELTS. If you were on a 2-and-2 program, so for instance, I know that there are especially many Chinese students who do 2 years at their university in China and then transfer to the United States and do 2 years here at a university or at a British university, and then get their bachelor's degree from both universities. Students who have done that kind of program must take either the TOEFL or the IELTS.
Just a quick, the IELTS or the TOEFL, do we get that prior to December 15 or do we get that later? Can we file
You
the
should sign up
application?
for it immediately, because usually we're already in December, so the test dates are rapidly approaching. We want those scores generally by the middle of January, latest.
Thank you so much.
For video selections in applications to things like for the documentary project, is that best to be done by a link, or do you ask for a video upload of the file?
If you give us the link, that will be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And any standard platform like YouTube or Vimeo would work for you?
Those all work.
Okay.
And there are some specific instructions in the application for video and audio.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm a first-year CPA student here. I'm looking for apply MS joint degree. So my question is on the application field, do we need to submit writing samples or like video samples or both?
You can submit written samples, video samples, audio samples. For written samples, you can also submit things because we recognize that there are people who may not have journalism experience or who have very little journalism experience. Those applicants can submit, if you write a blog, if there is a short academic paper that you have, you can use a number of those types of things. And if you have questions that are specific to your situation, please feel free to email us in the admissions office at admissions@jrn.columbia.edu, and we'll be able to help you with your specific situation.
Yeah, for the written samples, can I maybe only submit video clips or I have to submit at least written sample?
You should submit at least one written sample. I think that you probably have understood from what our faculty were saying and what the students were saying, reporting and writing are king and queen here at the journalism school. They are the basis for everything that anybody does as a journalist. So written clips are essential.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, thank you for your explanation. I had a question regarding the journalism writing test. What can we expect, and is there a certain way you can prepare for it?
The journalism writing test is one of the requirements for people who are applying to the Master of Science program, whether to the full or to the part-time program. The journalism writing test is a 90-minute timed test. It is given here at the journalism school most every Saturday and Sunday in January. Outside of New York City, whether outside here in the United States or any place in the world, we will find an alumni proctor who will administer the test for you. It's a 90-minute test. It's divided into 3 30-minute sections, and it's a writing test. There are short form and longer form answers that you can give to the questions. Pay attention to the news, what's going on locally, nationally, internationally. A lot of the topics you're able to choose, or you're given a choice of topics that you can write about. The short form questions, 3 sentences. The longer form are going to be several paragraphs. What we're trying to do is get an idea in your application of all of the different sorts of writing that you do. So you submit essays as a part of your application, you submit writing samples, and you submit the journalism school writing test. The essays and the writing samples show us what happens when you've had time to think, give some thought, edit what you've done, and presumably somebody else may have looked at them and edited them for you as well. The writing test shows us what happens when you just sit down and write. And we're looking at sentence structure, we're looking at analysis, synthesis, we're looking at grammar, we're looking at all of those things, because we are a journalism school. It doesn't have to be perfect, that's not what we're looking for. We're also looking for news judgment, just to give us some idea about the kinds of things you're paying attention to. So yeah, it's not a big scary thing, but it's put together with all of the application, the rest of the application, so that we get really, we hope, a good overall picture of who you are, what your writing is like, what your goals are when you come to graduate school for a journalism program, and specifically to Columbia.
Hi, my name is Shannon. I have a question in regards to the scholarships. I work for the New York State Senate and they provide a tuition reimbursement. So I'm just trying to find out, does having the ability to apply for a tuition reimbursement program, does it count against me when it comes to applying for scholarships that may be available here?
That will not count against you. You should definitely apply for scholarships.
Thank you.
What we find is that the tuition reimbursement programs frequently don't go far enough. So absolutely apply. Other questions? Anything from the chat? Okay. Thank you all very, very much for coming. Brett, David, Gina, and I are all available to answer any other questions that you might have individually. We also invite you, if you've got the time, to walk down the hall as you leave or come back a little bit later if you want to go grab lunch first, to take a look at our documentary film festival. It's one of the most exciting things that we have during the year. I see also that our director, or our Associate Dean of Career Services, Julie Hartenstein, has stepped in the back. She is also available to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you all very much for coming.